Hey, Guru, everyone.
Jai
Jai
Guru.
Guru.
Welcome to the next episode of Yogananda podcast. We're at the end of chapter 27 actually. We're at 27.4, and we're here with Priyank and Chris, no Lauren today. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you. How are
Fantastic.
you?
Yeah. Chris has an auspicious background today. Who's this Chris?
This is the man question that we're going to discuss a little bit more in more detail today, Swami Pranabananda. And
Ah.
yeah, maybe the viewers, they can see the image, but he's in lotus posture,
Mm,
meditative posture. He has quite a fierce look about him, certainly a
mm,
determined, focused one. So
certainly does. Yeah. Yeah. Before we get to him, Priyank, what happened in the previous episode?
So last time we talked about Guruji's little relationship with the deer, his love for this deer that appeared. There's actually stories actually in more detail, actually in lesson 78. So if anyone wants to look at that, but in the lesson it actually says that Guruji like saw someone else having a baby deer and he thought it was so
Mm,
beautiful. It was being fed with a bottle, and then the next like moment, the one appeared in his school. So we talk about that. And then we also mentioned a related story about Jad Bharat, which had a similar story in ancient Indian scripture, which I think provides some context for that deer story. We talked about how much Guruji loved this deer and didn't want to let it go even when it
mm,
was dying, but realized that he was holding it back. So he let it go. And then we talked about some intriguing interactions between his father um, and
mm,
and himself as a Swami son for Swami Yogananda, and also Swami Pranabananda, who we're going to talk about today.
mm, mhm. Because Swami Pranabananda was a guest at his father's Bhagavati's house in Kolkata. And the first thing that Yogananda, who met Swami Pranabananda before, we talked about it in the chapter The Saint with Two Bodies, which was Swami Pranabananda. And the first thing that Yogananda notices is that he's aged. He looks a bit older, and he remembers the amazing visit that he had when he met him the first time. He said his posture is still admirable, though.
Um, do you ever consider that our Guru Yogananda aged in his pictures? The obvious answer is obviously yes, but I see that every image is different. I feel like
Mhm.
for some reason, I feel like there's a different quality in each image, and that quality has a different like persona, like person. I see like a different person in virtually every one of Guruji's images. I don't know how you guys feel.
yeah, I've thought the same thing. And funny, I was thinking about this just recently. Um, in his last picture, you wouldn't have thought he is the age that he has. So
Mm,
even though he was working out a lot of karma in this life of other people's karma, not only his, we know that Yogananda was working with other folks, devotees' karma, which would have had an impact on the body. He still maintained this real youthful, vibrant energy, didn't he?
Mhm.
Guruji. So I thought socially, is it socially acceptable to say, hey, uh, to someone, are you feeling your age? Because you certainly look it.
That's a good point, though. I remember we've mentioned this about the bluntness and of like the Indian culture,
Mm.
conversational especially. Like you can just say things that are on your mind, and very little or no offense is taken by things like age and capacity and all these things.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. A nice way of not being offended easily, not being very sensitive. I like that. Um, so he sees Swami Pranabananda noticeably aged, and now he asks him that now that you're a bit older, do you feel this advanced age and the weakening body, and do you still feel the perception of God as you did before? Is it diminished in any way? And then he's very happy to hear that he says, the beloved is more than ever with me now. So
Mm.
the outer shell does not have any impact on that. It's your inner perception of God that is unharmed by that. And he said, Guruji says the conviction is overwhelmed him of Swami Pranabananda. And then Swami Pranabananda mentioned again, he's still enjoying the 2 pensions that he got. And we remember that from the Saint Two Bodies episodes. One pension was the one that Bhagavati gave him from the, what is it called? Bombay Nagpur Railroad or something.
Bengal.
Bengal Nagpur Railroad or Railway. And the other one is that spiritual pension that he got from being a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya.
I just wanted to note that the words here are significant, of course, that he's saying that, you know, the beloved God is with him ever more now than before. But Yogananda is highlighting the other thing that's important, which is how it's said and the conviction, right? Which is really nice to see, that the force of which he's speaking, super strong. We're going to see that later on in the story that comes through again. So he really, at this point in his life, having gone through everything he's gone through, extremely happy with the results, you would say.
And I think to bring that point home even more, he pointed his finger heavenward, and Guruji had the feeling that he was transfixed in ecstasy and had a divine glow in his face. So that was a very, like, he basically showed him that I'm in communion with God constantly.
So not only did the conviction overwhelm Mukunda or Swami Yogananda and Bhagavati, like overwhelmed his mind and soul, but also that this you know, when he had this transfixed in ecstasy and divine glow, that kind of radiance would have been quite beautiful to be a part of.
And so Swami Pranabananda, he was staying at Mukunda's or Swami Yogananda's dad's house. They were both disciples of Lahiri Mahashaya's, and he was in his room and he wanted to know why he had so many plants there that had packages of seed. And Swami Pranabananda told him that he's leaving Benares permanently. So he had this ashram there in Benares, and he said he's now going to the Himalayas with his disciples. And there he will grow a few vegetables and spinach and have a simple life with his disciples over there. And that's quite a shift in a life, right? And that he does that, I guess, with the thought in mind that his life is coming to an end. Yeah. So Bhagavati asked him if he will ever return to Kolkata, and Pranabananda said he will do it never again, and he will never come back.
The simple life that that he's going to live is to explain further that they're going to live simply and they're going to spend their time in blissful God union, and for that nothing else is necessary, because it is quite a meager stipend, isn't it? Just a few vegetables and some spinach. Especially considering if that doesn't grow well, then you're GG.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be GG anyway, but your devotees are also GG.
Definitely
GG, sorry.
GG.
GG. Sorry for the listeners. Is like at the end of a game, a computer game. That you played. You say good game.
Yeah, that's like perfect. When you go into mahasamadhi, you say good game. Yeah, I think that's the best. 100%. And he's like very emotional about this. And Yogananda says that his eyes filled with tears at his words. But he says the Swami replied tranquilly, and he reminded him of a little child, little heavenly child, sitting securely on the lap of the Divine Mother. So it was really we talked a lot about this, about like when death comes, it's like a very emotional thing and there's a lot of attachment. But when you are in communion with God, then you see that in a different perspective. Then you really see it like as coming home to the Lord.
Do you think Swami Yogananda's eyes are being filled with tears because Swami Pranabananda is recounting how Lahiri Mahashaya told him that this would be his last year and he's going to throw off his mortal frame, or because he actually is throwing off his mortal frame and Swami Pranabananda will no longer be with him? Because when someone talks about their relationship with their guru, especially with like really profound things that they've discussed or been told, then it becomes quite emotionally charged or devotionally charged, as Swami Yogananda is feeling.
I do think Yogananda has on a regular basis shown emotional reactions to when somebody who's close to them is passing away. So I think that definitely plays a role. But also that he's such a like real spiritual family, right? He's like one of his father's good friends, and he's someone who is a real spiritual master as well. Yeah. There's a section, there's a book that I found about Swami Pranabananda. It's called Life Sketch of Swami Pranabananda by Sri Chanendranath Mukhopadhyay. I hope I said his name without butchering it too much. And he's like, it's a little, I think they call it rightly a sketch because it's not very long. I wouldn't call it a biography, but it has some of the moments written down of Swami Pranabananda's life. And there's a section here about the part where he goes to the Himalayas. Chris, would you mind reading the first section?
At this time, his health began to gradually deteriorate, and he was eventually struck with chronic diarrhea. To improve his condition, Swamiji headed for Rishikesh. It was decided that there should be an ashram on a piece of land where the rivers Chandrabhaga and Ganges met, and arrangements to acquire this property were made. At that time, his only companion was a disciple named Sanandan Brahmachari. It was he who took the impetus to build the ashram and begin working on raising funds for the project.
After some funds were acquired in the month of September in 1918, Sanandan Brahmachari brought Swamiji to Bengal. Brahmachari's wish was that touring Bengal would bring some more money and that they would return to Rishikesh and begin building the ashram. Under the auspices of Swamiji's disciples, they visited several places in Bengal, such as Calcutta, Mednipur, Kanthi, and others.
Yeah, and so they were raising money, and then they built the small ashram in Rishikesh, where the story continues to unfold. Before it does, Guruji had like a paragraph where he talks about aging and the burden of the years, as he calls it, on the body. And he said it had no ill effect on the possession of the spiritual powers of a yogi. And he would be able to renew his body at will, but sometimes they choose not to.
You know, when we read that little story, it reminds me just how much I appreciate the Indian culture to support the spiritual seekers. It is a land of seekers, right? And really only in India, Nepal is a place where I was recently. Could you just see this spring up and probably have so much support in the local community to build ashrams and to support these seekers, these yogis to chase the infinite, really. So it's just nice to see it. This is how the foundations work in many instances, grassroots, coming in with the support of the people. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, 100%. I think Priyank is going to talk about this later a little bit, about the act of giving to swamis. Yeah. So this this person called Sananda Brahmachari, yeah, in this story that we just read out, I'm fairly sure it's the same person that we are going to read about now here in the autobiography, because Yogananda says months later he met an old friend, Sanandan, who was one of Pranabananda's close disciples, and he tells him the story now of Swami Pranabananda leaving his body. And he starts with, "My adorable guru is gone." And he's sobbing. And he told him that he established a hermitage near Rishikesh, and he gave us loving training. And when we were pretty well settled and making progress, he proposed to have a feast for a huge crowd. And he said he inquired why he wanted such a large number. And then Swami Pranabananda said, "This is my last festival ceremony." And Sananda said that I did not understand the full implications of these words.
Yeah, this last ceremony, there's a couple of things that are prevalent in Indian culture. So there's the act of feeding people. It's called Anadanam. Is like the gift of feeding Brahmins or poor or animals. Is like really supposed to be meritorious, and it's like one of the core principles, essentially charity. But feeding people is like the best charity, especially Brahmins, as we mentioned here, or Mike was mentioned earlier, that there'll be a lot of renunciant sannyasis and brahmacharis that wouldn't stay in the same place for like more than 3 days. They'd just always be on the move, so they wouldn't have a kitchen, they wouldn't have wealth. They'd kind of rely on God or you through God. So yeah, this is one of the things that he's doing, and it's also like it kind of is like something called bun, which basically is clears your like karmic burdens, or bab, as we call it as well. So it's got multifaceted benefits doing this, and if someone announces something huge like this, then you kind of know that it could be the end or near the end. People often do it when they're older, much older.
Oh, very interesting. So this feast that they organized, it says Pranabananda, he helped with the cooking, and he said they fed about 2,000 guests. So you got to imagine that this is a large amount. Like these days, if you want to have an event for 2,000 guests, you have to buy all sorts of tents and rent a big property and everything. So
like the Western Bonaventure, is it, Mike?
That's right. You have to rent a hotel with a big ballroom. That's right. And then the story goes that after the feast, he sat on a high platform, and Sanandan sat with him, and Swami Pranabananda gave a sermon to the crowds. And at the end, before the gaze of thousands, he turned to me as I sat beside him on the dais and spoke with unusual force. He said, "Sanandan, be prepared. I'm going to kick the frame." And of course, by that he means I'm going to leave the body behind. And Sanandan says, after a stunned silence, I cried, "Master, don't do it. Please don't do it." And the crowd remained silent, wondering at my words. I'm guessing the crowd didn't really hear the words that Swami Pranabananda was saying. Only when Sanandan cried out, they were wondering what was going on. And then Swami Pranabananda, he told him lovingly, he said, "I shall be reborn shortly. After enjoying a brief period of infinite bliss, I shall return to earth and join Babaji." And I can only imagine a life like that, where you grow up and the first thing you want to do is leave for the Himalayas and meditate with Babaji's group.
He tells Sananda already kind of knows. I think he probably knows that this is why that they're going, but it doesn't stop him from being really emotional, or really caught up by the physical loss of the guru, obviously, the spiritual, there is no spiritual loss, you know, is omnipresent. But he's really moved, isn't he? That he's really moved because Swami Pranabananda has to say, "Don't be selfish, don't grieve for me. I've been serving you all for so long. Now rejoice and wish me Godspeed that as I go to meet my cosmic beloved." These are really like heart-tugging words, aren't they?
Why do you guys think that he said the word selfish? Because when I read it initially, I thought, you know, it is a curious word, maybe not immediately obvious. Do you guys have any thoughts there, or I can share what I think if unless you guys have it. You know, we talked about the at death, what is the best way, you know, yogically speaking, you know, from a yogic perspective to pass, and it's going into the woods and sort of making yourself scarce, let's say, and you know, going back to nature. But that in part is to not tie yourself into desires and attachment to those around you, right? So we read about the story about the attachment that one prince had with a deer, and then ended up being incarnated as the deer. So the selfishness, from my understanding, there is like, it's actually going to be a little bit more challenging if even if the guru has his devotees there, sort of willing him to stay and not pass, because then he can do that more easily and not have any of these sort of lingering attachments and of desires in this this age. Is that what you read into as well? Yeah. It is, yeah. Yeah, because I imagine that to somebody who maybe wouldn't be so familiar with these types of stories, that it's like, oh, why did he say selfish? You know? But there is deep yogic meaning behind it.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound morbid, but for him, it's not dying at all, right? Kicking the frame. So for him, it's more like he's moving to another country and you will never see him again. And in that sense, I think it makes maybe a bit of sense that you feel like, I won't be able to see him anymore. I won't be able to be in his presence anymore. And maybe that's why I'm really sad. Rather than I don't think you have to worry about his well-being once he passed on. I think he will be just fine. Yeah. And we all know how it is when an avatar goes, when your guru leaves the body, and you feel like the connection, if anything, might be even stronger than before. That's what Yogananda often says.
Don't you find it really strange that he has to be reborn, because he's obviously capable of not needing to be reborn, but then he has to, it feels like he's got to be reborn because he's still got some things to fulfill for his guru, i.e. Babaji, or his guru's guru, which is Babaji, which he mentions here, you know, I'm going to be reborn and join Babaji. But one can't help but wonder that what mission what mission he has, or if he's still around for that mission.
Yeah, I wonder if this is part of helping, like, you know, maybe not necessarily being a guru, but coming back and helping others in the world reach the goal of liberation as well. That this isn't part of that.
And you can imagine, like, there being really pious parents to which he was reborn to, because very shortly after he was born, we find out in a few paragraphs that he kind of left and joined Babaji. So, like, you've got to be, you know, these aren't going to be ordinary parents. These are going to be like, you know, Mukunda's father probably and mother.
Yeah, and so it happens. So he tells him that, and he tells Sanandan, you shall soon know when and where my soul has been encased in a new body. And then he cried out, Sanandan, here I kick the frame by the second Kriya Yoga. And that is, of course, very interesting in multiple ways. Priyan first.
So we were just discussing this about the second Kriya. So most of us, or a lot of us, have been initiated into Kriya Yoga, which beautiful process. After many years of studying the lessons and showing your loyalty to the practices and to Guru, and you become initiated into the first Kriya, and then after you've been doing that for some time, you can apply for the second Kriya, which is a whole new sort of set of practices that actually supplement the first Kriya. And then I think, Mike, you were saying third and fourth Kriyas are actually put together and they're given to you together. So that's the third Kriya. Is that right? So which one would this be then? Second Kriya, the one that is second in SRF, or the third and fourth one, do you think?
Well, luckily we have a footnote that tells us. And the footnote says it's the second one that he received from Lahir Mahashaya, but it's the third one you would receive if you're on the path of YSS or SRF. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So we thought of everything. Questions like that. Yeah. And then Swami Pranabananda, he went on, he looked at the sea of faces for them, and then he gave a blessing, and then he directed his gaze inwards to the spiritual eye. He became immobile. And while the crowd thought he was meditating in an ecstatic state, he had already left, as they call it, the tabernacle of flesh, and had plunged into this cosmic vastness. Yeah.
I am the bubble,
What?
maybe the sea.
Yeah. What a way to go. Yeah.
And
there's
just
yes.
Right, guys, can I ask a question here? Because in the note it says that the third Kriya, which we can all perceive if we persevere, this allows the devotee who's mastered it to leave and return to the body consciously. So is this talking about the same body in the same lifetime, but this technique can also be used by leaving the body and going into another body? Is that what we're taking from it?
I don't think so. I don't think that's mentioned anywhere.
Reincarnation.
Oh yes, in reincarnation. Oh, interesting.
Because it doesn't really specify that, if I'm reading it correctly. Yeah.
I think I read this as re-enter this as what the footnote is, as entering samadhi, essentially having an out-of-body kind of experience, forgetting the body, and then returning to the body consciously, or moving on. As Swami Yogananda did.
Right.
I think there's
using that technique in order to do what he's doing, right? So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, I wonder if that had anything to do with where he incarnated afterwards. Possibly. I don't know. There's a section in God Talks with Arjuna in chapter 8, verse 5, where they talk about the process of leaving the body and some of the karmic implications around it. I thought we could read that out. Chris, would you mind reading the first section?
In Rishikesh, Swamiji.
No, a yogi practices.
Oh, forgive me, of course.
I'll read that. You can read my section. A yogi. Oh, you found it. Go for it.
A yogi who practices meditation throughout life is able to commune with God at any time, especially the crucial time of death. A man's thoughts at the last moments of life determine his status in the hereafter. A true yogi finishes the dream actings of his role in life and makes his final exit from the earthly stage, his mind fixed only on the bliss of spirit, his heart untainted by any mundane longings.
After death, a devotee is not required by karmic law to return to earth if, during his lifetime, he has been able, through yoga practice, to disconnect his life force and consciousness from the body, and if he had been successful at will in entering the conscious, breathless state, maintaining life in the body by drawing a supply of cosmic energy from God, and if he had been non-attached to the body and to sense objects, and if he had had no personal desires but had remained undisturbed by egoistic wishes for any person or object or sense enjoyment, thus knowing only the joy and love of his creator.
Such a devotee, without doubt, attains freedom and merges with the divine being. He needs no further incarnations on earth for the satisfaction of unfulfilled desires, for he has rendered them all non-existent. A self-disciplined yogi who has trained his mind to be detached at will from the sensory world and to unite that emancipated mind with the Lord thinks of nothing but him at the time of death. According to the law of karma, that man has automatically created the cause that must manifest as the effect of God attainment. He who in life avoided all inharmony and who was accustomed to being absorbed in yoga ecstasy remains after death in the same state of divine union. Such a yogi, throughout life, sees his physical form as a dream of God. When the atoms of that body dreams are dispersed by death, he wakes up in the dreamless bliss. And I imagine that Swami Pranabananda was in that state and in that situation, that he had no earthly desires left and had no reason to come back. And if he said he would come back to serve Babaji, then that was probably at his own discretion.
So in this case, if like avatars like Lahiri Mahashaya, Yogananda, and so on, they reincarnate for what? Because my mind immediately goes to for our desires to be liberated, right? So it's the ultimate selfless act of reincarnation in this world for others, isn't it, to be of service to others, which is a very beautiful thing. Because when I was listening to you guys read through this, all I could think of, there's a lot of ifs here of you know, heights that we must reach, which is great. We know where we're aiming for, and it helps orientate me in how I consider myself in this world. But they're quite high bars, I suppose, to reach. But having our gurus having reached these, what are they incarnating for? They're incarnating for our soul's cry for liberation, right? Which is really beautiful to consider.
Would you do it, Chris? Have you had to come back for others?
What is it Guruji says, to how, to the extent to which he was committed, he essentially would come back as many times
again,
again and again. Yeah. That's our
so
leader.
yes, then you would.
I would strive to attain my guru's leadership. Yeah.
So I suppose that's a better answer than I'm out. See you later. Every man for himself.
Yeah. Once over that line, Priyank, never coming back.
Yeah. It might sound easier to do this now than when you're actually at the door of divine bliss.
Yeah. If you're assigned by God, can you take up the mantle?
Well, if God asks me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
First of all, after he passed away, disciples came to Pranabananda, touched his body, and they noticed that it was stiff and it was no longer warm flesh. And then the sentence is, the tenant had fled to the immortal shore.
So almost certainly this would have been people touching his feet and then touching their forehead with the same hand, or some devotees would have actually potentially touched their forehead to his feet, and hence they could feel how his flesh was stiff and cold and returned to the immortal shore. But this in a lot of places this can be considered rude, to not rude, like uncouth, almost to disrespect someone by touching them whilst they've passed. But that's that's not a thing in India.
In open casket, at funerals, we have open caskets, and I remember touching my grandmother's hand, and everybody was encouraged to sort of pay respects that way. So my experience in Catholic circles, it's not uncouth either.
Okay, good.
After the footnote about Kriya Yoga, there was another section here in that same footnote where Guruji says great yogis that go in and out of the spiritual eye, that he called it the pranic star or door of salvation. And then he quotes the Bible. He says, Christ said, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief, and then in brackets it says Maya or delusion, cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I, in brackets the Christ consciousness, am come to thy might have life, that thy might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. And it's from John 10:9-10. And there is a section in the Second Coming where Guruji comments on that, and I thought we could read that out.
In truth, I declare unto you that Christ consciousness in me and in all other liberated souls is the only door through which devotees can enter into cosmic consciousness. That realization identifies every truly great teacher. But those so-called spiritual teachers, whoever came before me, that is, who exalt their ego and personality to attract devotees before they have attained any realization of Christ consciousness, are metaphysical thieves and robbers, stealing for themselves the devotee's devotion meant for God. But those who thus elevate themselves, eclipsing the egotistical human consciousness, the Christ consciousness in their souls, could not get true devotees, the sheep, to listen to their empty rhetoric.
Christ consciousness is the door. If any devotee by meditation enters in, that is, realizes the Christ consciousness in me also present in his own soul, he shall be saved. He will have the privilege of consciously going in and out through the pranic star door in the spiritual eye, of escaping eternally from the misery of reincarnations into the absolute freedom of cosmic consciousness, or of willingly returning to the world to help mankind. He will find pasture of eternal happiness. I didn't read that before. I mentioned what I said earlier, so Mike, you're sending out your signals, and I'm picking up your Bluetooth.
There you go. I do think this is a beautiful section, also because it's a section in the Bible that's often misinterpreted as in me, Jesus, am the only one, right? Who can give you salvation. And Guruji clarifies here, and it's the Christ consciousness is meant here, and not just one teacher.
I think it's really powerful. He says, I am the door. And then he says, I am come that they might have life and that they may have it more abundantly. I just think there's just such power in these verses from John.
Yeah.
Isn't there?
Yeah. And I feel like if you have the right context, then they unfold most of their power, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing I found.
The only problem with the wrong say you're like a hardcore Christian and you think that only Jesus Christ is the door, and there are no other doors. Does it matter that much? Because you could just live kind of an isolated kind of life in terms of your religious practices and devotion, and then you go through that door. But the problem comes when you kind of criticize or like try and enforce your position on the others, and that's where the whole interpretation or the correct interpretation of what Guruji describes needs to come in, i.e. the false teachers, you know.
Yeah. Well, at least it's a distracting thought that comes up, and this way it doesn't. This way it makes perfect sense. Yeah. There's one more thing I found about this mahasamadhi of Swami Pranabananda, and that's in Phil Goldberg's book. And he says in his notes section at the end of the book, he says, "It is said that upon his death, Swami Pranabananda's body, as per his own instructions, was placed in a trunk, locked with chains, and submerged overnight in the Ganges. The next morning, the trunk was empty." So I think
It's
a bit earlier,
bit like Kabir's passing, isn't it? Kabir, where he left
the
and
roses.
then they opened it and there's a casket of roses.
A bit earlier there was a sentence where Yogananda said he was dramatic in life as in death, and I think that's quite true.
Yeah.
Quite true. And then in the next two paragraphs, Guruji goes on and he talks about he finishes the conversation with Sanandan, and he said exactly that sentence. He said the blessed saint with two bodies was dramatic in his life as in his death. Yeah. To be reborn. And Guruji also asked Sanandan where he would be reborn if he knew, because I think Guruji might have sought him out if that, but he said that he told it to him in trust and he wouldn't reveal it at this time. And then later on, so Guruji comes back. Oh, Priyank?
No, you carry on, sorry.
So later on, way later. So I guess right now we are in the year maybe 1918, 19, around this time, I think. It's before Guruji has gone to America. But once he goes there, he will come back in 1935, 36. He goes back to India, and there he meets Swami Keshavananda, who is another disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya. And he tells him the story, and he tells him that he got a new body and he'd gone to Badrinarayan in the Himalayas, and he joined Babaji. And in that chapter there, where Yogananda
Chapter
goes
45.
back to India, 45, there's a beautiful picture of Swami Keshavananda at Guruji.
Yeah, and if it's not shocking enough for the lay person to read this, it says a few years after his birth. So a toddler essentially.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah,
maybe.
I'm not misunderstanding that, right? It's to be interpreted kind of literally. So
you think as a 5-year-old, maybe?
Yeah, a few years, right? So it's only a handful of years in a new body. So the realization that he carried over was so strong that he was able just to, as soon as he could walk, essentially go with multiple saints, a group of saints on the great Babaji. That's a different level.
I think you're quite spot on, Chris. There's a name for such what are they called? Illumined masters that are born realized. They're called Bali yogis, which is basically child yogis. And Shukha, who was Shukha Goswami, he was one of he's in a long lineage from like Parashara. He was found to have been one of these devotees that are born realized. So this, I wouldn't be surprised if he was in single digits when he did leave his family, and his family would have had signs. They would have known that this is not an ordinary child, just like Lehi Mahashai, when he was a child, he used to bury himself in sand, all that kind of, and meditate completely still, where children obviously can't usually do that. But I find one quick thing that Sanandan tells him. He says, perhaps you'll find out another way, because I'm not going to tell you where he's born. And the next chapter is Kashi Reborn, where Guruji essentially finds a devotee that has been reborn. So Swami Yogananda certainly had the prowess to be able to do it, even at this point in his journey.
And Guruji, in that chapter 45, he has like a few sentences where he says, when he found Swami Keshavananda, he said, I had never forgotten Sri Yukteswar's request that I write the life of Lahiri Mahashaya. During my stay in India, I was taking every opportunity to contact direct disciples and relatives of the Yoga avatar, recording their conversations in voluminous notes. I verified facts and dates and collected photographs, old letters, and documents. My Lahiri Mahashaya portfolio began to swell. I realized with dismay that ahead of me lay arduous labors in authorship. I prayed that I may be equal to my role as a biographer of the colossal guru. So that was not by accident that they met. He actually sought him out and asked him for those, so he could write it down for us to enjoy. Behold. Yeah. So this is the end of chapter 27. Do we have any reflections on this chapter? What was the part that we found was the most striking or the most interesting or touched us the most?
I really loved it from start to finish, like the gentle and jovial encouragement Swami Yogananda Sri Yukteswar gives to Guruji to like make him take on social responsibility, and like I just love how that relates to me personally, because he says, like, if you don't have a family, then you have a much larger responsibility, and that's essentially something that I've taken to my heart as well, because I'm not having my own children. So, but I've got this whole opportunity to serve Guruji and his various works, with more free time than other people may have, family people they have. So I really delight in doing that and take comfort in knowing that our gurus have kind of proved this kind of path if you do it selflessly. So it really is quite a sweet chapter, isn't it, of Swami Yogananda, and how he relates stories about his time at the school and the deer, and how he established ashrams and schools, and what they are now, and looking at their journey, and how obviously they're really important to us as YSS and SRF devotees, but we don't know how important, we can't see the whole picture as to how important all these little moments were to the rest of humanity. It's like a domino effect that we don't usually see as well. And then we had obviously some very profound elements, like on death, not just from the deer, but on the mahasamadhi of Swami Pranabananda. So it really was a very comprehensive chapter, covering everything from the jovial to the profound.
Yeah, it mixed it well, didn't it? Whenever you look at the beginning of the chapter, you think what the content's going to be, to where we just ended up, the depths of the topics there. Having gone through the Autobiography of a Yogi, going through it again with a fine-tooth comb many years later, the appreciation that I have for Guruji and what he has done through the organizational work that he was initially resistant to is now through the roof. It's really nice just to see in more granular detail what he did, how he set it up, and the success. Good to see the success that he had initially, and it's nice to learn a little bit more about the wider success that it's gone on to have, the educational system and how it could be reformed. That topic's actually quite close to my heart. And so, yeah, it was nice to see that in a bit more granular detail.
Yeah, I can only echo some of the things you guys said, like this thought that if you don't serve a family with children, that you instead serve a greater cause. That is something that Guruji stresses often, and it somehow gives a, like, if Guruji wouldn't have been tasked with going to the West, what he would have done in India if he would have stayed might have been something like this: create more of those schools maybe, and create ashrams. And it shows early that he has this incredible skills. He's very persuasive. He raised money for the school, and he organized. I mean, he's very humble. He doesn't talk about all the organizational work he had to do to get this to work, and then even outlast him, like, after he left, the school carried on. So it's very powerful work that he did there in India before he came to America. And it gave this final reconciliation with him and his father, where his father suddenly said, like, son, you didn't do anything I told you, but I'm proud of you.
I see now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention that part actually as well, because it was a closure of many sort of developing chapters in the beginning of the book, right? Where the father sort of finally comes around and gives the tip of the hat. But just what you touched on, both of you guys there, about the wider family topic, and that's a really common thread here. It's no more necessary, this teaching, in the world than today, probably, because we're seeing declining numbers in terms of people choosing not to have children, and then seeking meaning in life. And just what you're both talking about there, giving yourself in service to other, in other ways, what provides that satisfaction. So yeah, it's this teaching, if it could get out to the world, would greatly help hundreds and hundreds of couples, millions maybe, in time, that choose not to have kids. And yeah, it helps us sort of orientate ourselves to the wider family of the world. So it's quite a timely subject.
Yeah, and I think with this we can end the episode for today, and we're looking forward to chapter 28. Priyanka already mentioned it. It's going to be Kashi's Death and Reborn. Is that what it's called? Yeah. All right. Thank you to the listeners and the viewers on YouTube. Jai Guru.
There you go.
Jai Guru.